Difficult conversations. It's probably the thing that fuels my practice more than anything else is the fact that people don't know how to have difficult conversations. So by the fact that I'm even teaching this subject may mean that I have less clients over time
Which
if
would be
people learn how to
awesome.
do this.
Which would be awesome.
Yeah, work myself out of a business.
What is it that makes a conversation difficult?
Oh, let's see. Well, one, it could certainly be the subject matter. So is there going to be a potential for conflict? That's usually the number one reason why people don't have conversations is because there's a possibility that there could be conflict in the conversation. So
Yes.
Same.
from someone who's a conflict avoider, yes, you would agree. And I think all of us here probably have more of an avoidant style when it comes to conflict. I just happen to be aware that I have an avoidant style and know it's not effective.
I'm also aware and also still avoid.
Yes.
I'm like, I'm avoiding conflict right now. Yes, I am. See you later.
So
go hide.
as a group of conflict avoiders, we still have to work together as a team. So oftentimes we have to have difficult conversations as a way to maintain a team atmosphere. Because the things that go untalked about are usually the things that people let fester and grow, and then they come out in these little proxy wars where you argue about small stuff that really has to do about bigger things. And then when you finally have a conversation that's difficult, you end up bringing all of the conversations in at once and you never get anywhere. So that's another thing that creates a difficult conversation is if I've got to have a conversation with somebody that I've got a lot of resentment or frustration built up with, I may end up inadvertently triggering all the conversations at once. And then we've got all that pain, anger, and angst, and we never really get anywhere.
Or you're also coming in it with a predisposed judgment of how it's going to go or what you think, and you come in it already rearing for a fight.
Yes.
So then you're not already coming in not listening or not speaking to be heard.
That's a really good point. A lot of times people feel like they have to be mad in order to have a difficult conversation. And what I try to get across to people in those circumstances is if you can do this mad, why can't you do this any other way? Because you're already going to come at it from a deficit if you have to be angry to do it, and you know it's not going to work out well. So if you can say this stuff angry, what keeps you from saying it calmly? Before you have to get to the point where you're angry in order to have the conversation. But then we have to better understand why people avoid conflict in the first place. So we have 4 conflict avoiders here. Let's just talk about why. For me personally, I don't like to hurt people's feelings. I don't want people to feel upset, if at all possible. Now, I do understand how counterproductive that is, so I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. And I realize that by the time it's all said and done, we're going to feel better if we have a really good conversation about it, even if it was difficult. But I still picture that person's hurt feelings and how it's going to trigger my empathy. So I'm going to feel bad because that person feels bad. And then I'm like, well, I shouldn't do that. But I just have to work to overcome it. So that's my reason. What's yours?
It's similar, except for sometimes for me, it's like you said, you're aware that I don't want to hurt people's feelings. I'm aware of how counterproductive that is and how nothing's going to change if I don't say something. Nobody's ever going to get better or learn more about me or whatever if I don't have a conversation. And so but then I realize I need to do that. But then I start thinking about, okay, well, can I have this conversation? So if my anxiety levels are so high that I feel like I can't control my own reactions, I'm going to avoid the conversation because a lot of people have to, don't really have the skills of having the conversation. And if I feel like I need to be the one leading the conversation, then I'm not going to go in it if I don't feel like I'm capable of handling myself.
So you're afraid you're going to lose your cool?
Yes, I'm afraid. And now I can do it in a lot of situations. Some situations I can't do it in. I have a harder time.
Especially if you're already anxious or frustrated.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So
being able to control myself is what worries me a lot in conflict.
So Stacy, what about you?
There's a lot of conversations I think that we collectively avoid because they are not polite conversation or socially acceptable, that there's a variety of opinions on those topics and people have very strong emotions about them. I have a lot of opinions that and feelings about things that aren't generally shared, and I avoid those topics of conversation a lot because I know people have strong feelings about them, as I do. And me and Andrea were actually talking about this. If you know that a topic of conversation is going to be triggering for somebody in some way, that's going to cause them to have like high emotions about it, you already know that you need to come into it with like needing to not be triggered by their being triggered by it. And sometimes that's hard, especially if you've got a lot of investment into your particular thoughts and feelings about that subject. So a lot of times, because of social politeness and such, I'll just avoid those topics entirely.
I mean,
which is unfortunate though, because we need to be having these conversations.
We should be having these difficult.
It's hard to have those kind of conversations though, because it's like the kind that Stacey's talking about in particularly, because you would just be seen as like a gay person in the 1950s. Or,
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you may
That's
be seen
how
as
you would
like
be treated.
like an outcast in some way.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
worse.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in some circumstances, is that what you fear? A lot of times, is the
No,
repercussions
not in a regular difficult conversation, but like some of the more
in a charged conversation. Yeah, sure.
like a
politically charged conversation or something, or a values conversation or something to that degree.
But on like a regular like difficult conversation between like me and my husband, I think I'm more worried about like the other person's reaction or just not being my point of view not being valued or saw.
Yeah, sure. So that's another fear too, is that the other person, especially if it's someone we care about, may not value our opinion, and it may make us feel like, well, then if you don't value my opinion, do you even listen to me? Do you care what I care about? You know, is our relationship like where it needs to be? Because I need to feel like you value at least my opinion, whether you agree with it or not, that you at least can see where I'm coming from in order to know that we are on the same page in some way, shape, or form, and especially if it's a really important relationship. But another thing, you know, touching on what you talked about earlier, another thing that can make a conversation difficult is the charged emotions behind it. This is why they say that the things that people shouldn't discuss at dinner are like religion and politics, which honestly finances, yes. But you know, it's like those are the things we should absolutely be talking about more often.
I always wondered why we can't talk about finance. Like, why is it rude to ask somebody about their why can't you do that? Because since we don't talk about it, more people don't know how to deal with their finances. Like,
that's a big part of it, right?
Or
Money's sensitive to talk about for a lot of people.
Yeah.
but why though?
Right.
right, and why religion and politics? I guess it's because it's such a personal thing.
Well, okay,
Religion can be very personal.
Well, of course, it's a hugely personal thing, but let's talk about why that is. So you have to understand, I mean, finances especially, let's just look at that. That's a quick one. Is the reason a lot of people have a hard time talking about it is I could say, you know, I could have the conversation, here's how well I'm doing. And that might be a good conversation, interesting conversation to have. But if somebody else is not doing as well, or maybe somebody's doing a lot better, it could make somebody in the conversation feel like they're less than. Like, I guess I'm failing because my finances are not as good as yours. So you could inadvertently make somebody feel like they're a failure. And a lot of times, the other reason it's not brought up is a lot of people put on a facade. So they put things out there like, look how well I'm doing. But if we have a real conversation about this, actually, I'm really deep in debt and I'm barely making it from month to month. And so I don't want to do that. I don't want to have that conversation if it's going to break some type of facade that I've tried to put out there. So I'm not going to be honest in the conversation. So it's one I just want to try to avoid and put something out there instead.
Even if being honest could get you some kind of advice that could help you.
Sure, absolutely. Because you're not looking for advice. You're just looking to be propped up as to being something you're not. So that's one reason why finances don't get discussed. Now, religion and politics, they're one of the main reasons why those things don't get discussed often, but should, is because people have their identity attached to them. And so a lot of times in circumstances where you don't have a really good self-identity, you attach yourself to the things you believe as if they are who you are. So you are what you believe in those circumstances. Like your thoughts are you. And if you get those challenged and another person starts to make you feel uncomfortable by like, maybe you're not right, then you start to get like, well, maybe I'm not a valuable human being. Maybe you are invalidating who I am, and I don't like that. So I'm going to fight back, even if it's in a way that is counterproductive.
Right, and that can, like, talking about religion and stuff like that, it can be, even, you could be afraid of other people finding out that maybe you have a different religious view than what is socially acceptable.
Sure.
Like,
and so you might not be accepted into the group.
Or
so you
into
might be shunned.
the town or the society
Sure.
or whatever.
Yeah, and so that's a huge fear that people have. Fear of rejection from the group is a massive fear. Now, some people...
It's a primitive fear.
Very much so. Some people take on the rebel role, and they just, like, go against that. Is a way of trying to overcome that fear, but the fear is still very present, is I don't want to feel separated from the group. They just deal with it by overemphasizing and identifying with that role, and then trying to be the villain of everybody else as a way of saying, look how different I am. And I'm okay with that, even though that scares them. But a lot of people, most people, just go with compliance. They go with conformity. They just nod their head and like, yeah, sure, that's what I believe, but please don't question me on it because I really can't go very deep. I don't think about this very much. So they don't really think about it a lot. They just nod their head and go along with it.
They follow the herd.
Yeah, it's herd mentality, but herd mentality is important because it's one of the reasons why we're able to like be a society.
Yeah,
It keeps
form
you
cities
safe,
and towns and such.
Yeah.
And safety is one of the most important thing.
The funny thing is, though, who are you keeping yourself safe from? Other groups.
But it's kind of like
with different beliefs.
It's kind of like when we were talking about narcissism, and we were talking about how you might see a narcissistic person as powerful because of the things that they portray.
Yes.
Okay, so it's similar, as in like you
comply
so that you feel safe, but you're not putting yourself in a situation that really makes you feel safe, like emotionally.
Yeah, sure. I think we should definitely have the capability, if we want to be healthy adults and even healthy groups, to have open conversations with people about our belief systems from different things, and do our best not to shun or judge. I may not agree with you. I will have a conversation about any belief system. I don't care what it is. I'm willing to listen to you in your position. I want to understand why you believe what you believe. I'm not scared at all that you're going to make me have a different belief. You may make me think different about my belief, but my belief pretty much stays the same. Even if you make me think a little bit different about it, I still have my way of enacting, and I'm not trying to force it on anybody.
Right. Just because you question something doesn't necessarily mean that you're going against it.
No,
It's
not
just,
at all.
I wonder why this is.
Yeah,
And then
sure.
You think on it and come to whatever conclusion fits your...
Which can oftentimes strengthen your belief.
Right.
Because you
I've
find
had
a way
that
to
happen lots
resolve
of times.
that.
Yeah.
And or even when you finally realize that, I guess, I don't know if there is a way to resolve this, but I really don't care. I like my belief. I'm going to keep it, and that's just mine. And that's how it is. And that's okay, too.
Yep.
I think it's important to explore other religious beliefs.
I think it's important to hear other people's perspectives.
Yes.
Well,
think-
yeah.
yeah.
I don't mean like to just, but I
Yeah.
mean like just have the knowledge of
Right.
why.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that with a lot of these very high emotion areas, that we don't explore these conversations with each other because they are so triggering. But what's unfortunate about it is politically, right?
Yeah,
okay,
sure.
so like in the political arena, the two sides are so entrenched on their own particular sides,
Yeah,
right?
sure, yeah.
That there's no room for conversation so that we can start coming to the middle and finding solutions
It's like a
that are
literal-
compromises for each party. Like there's got to be some middle ground somewhere, and we have been working so hard not having these conversations and not exploring like why this person has that perspective, so that maybe we can try to find like, okay, well, I understand why you feel this way. This is how I feel about it. Where's the common ground? Because there's almost always some common ground.
Yes.
It is literally like an arena. Like when you said arena, I was like, it's like a gladiator arena. Like just put a red and a blue in there and just
Yeah, just
don't
watch
go.
them swing at each other till one of
Right.
them's dead. But the problem is, in those circumstances, what you're saying is that you're looking at the person who may believe something different than you as a foe. They are someone that's an antagonist to you, and that's not how we get things done. You may have to look at another person as, okay, you believe something different, but there is something that we share here. And even if we were to go, if we were to implement either of the extremes, we'd probably tear everything apart because most societies don't work off of any type of real extreme.
Most people don't realize that we need a balance of both.
Sure.
Both of our parties. We can't just be all one or all the other, or we fall apart.
Yeah.
As a
And maybe some
society.
that aren't even there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and other ideas too, and other
Right,
belief
we're
systems.
still stuck on this. We can only be this or that.
Yeah,
And that we've been doing for hundreds and hundreds of years.
yeah, sure.
We've evolved as a species.
As a people too, just as a culture. Just
and
even
some
as our
things that we
cultural
were doing
ideas.
then just don't work now, and we could.
They
there's
could be better.
There's,
They
we-
could be better.
We could be better.
We could absolutely be better. So the ability to have a difficult conversation is what could help us be better. And I think a lot of times the other reason people don't have difficult conversations is that they don't know how. And even in the sense of they don't know how to be informed. And they're even maybe in some circumstances not even capable of the level of a deep conversation, and that scares them.
Or in my instance, like they may not be able to control themselves.
Yeah.
Anxiety, whatever, emotionally. And for me, it's anxiety. And then my anxiety just clouds over everything. Having a one-on-one conversation with someone gives me a lot of anxiety. So,
Sure.
so I mean, you can't get over that
That fear.
fear, yes,
Yeah.
of just having a conversation.
Well, and it's just also the idea too that you can't even get past. Have you ever talked to somebody really, really smart? And when you talk to somebody really smart who knows something really well, that a lot
Yeah.
of times you're
And you're
like,
like, I can't even keep up with this
I was
conversation.
like, I'm trying. I'm really trying, but I can't.
Everybody's looking at you, man.
You're looking at the guy that fumbled the entire first part of this show.
Actually-
and couldn't even get his words out of his mouth, and you're looking at me as the smart one. We're all in trouble. if
Well,
that's
I'm
the
just saying
case.
that there have been times when I'm like, I got to catch up with that one. So,
I try to be relatable, but I'm only smart in some things. I mean, like when you have conversations about things with people that are their specialty,
yes, I know.
you're like, man, I'd really like to follow you, but I feel really dumb right now, so I'm just going to nod my head and go, yeah, I think I agree with you, but I have no idea. And if you have an insecurity about that, that can make you shy away and like, you're just being intellectual, and I don't like that. And I mean, you're just thinking this to death.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, sometimes that is the case, or
I mean-
a certain level of knowledge is bliss. Like, this is as far as I care to know.
There are some things I do feel that way about. Like, I don't want to
Sure.
know any more about it. I'm happy with what I've got right here. Not a lot of things, but there are some things that I'm like that. I'm like,
Yeah, it's like, you may know something I don't know, but I really don't have the capacity to learn more right now, and so I'm just going to have to stick with what I know. But I'll hold on to that idea for maybe later when I have more time to study it. But I can't get into a deep conversation. But that's what But here's what we've done. Even as a country, we've demonized being intellectual in that sense. Like, being too knowledgeable is a problem, and because we can't keep up with the conversation with some people that are too knowledgeable, or anything else, we just demonize it, and like, that's a bad thing.
Oh, hey, this made a little thought bubble pop up in my
Yes.
head. But like, okay, so these difficult conversations, a lot of times we're not having them too because it takes time to have difficult conversations.
Yes.
You have to dig deep. And we're in this culture of like memes and having these little like blips that like are catchy little like catchphrases that
Facebook
like
arguments too?
yeah,
Yes.
and they trigger reactions, right? These little catchy things. They trigger immediate responses out of us. And having those difficult conversations requires us to like not react immediately. We have to go deeper into what all of the ins and outs are and like the different perspectives. And it's not so cut and dry and black and white, but
Yes.
our culture is promoting us to look in these black and white terms, this side or that side. And it's so much easier to boil things down into a little sound bite that doesn't ever get to the root of what something really is.
yeah. And I'm like, we've been researching this, like the politics of mental health and these things like that. And when you actually have to get into like the facts things, when you get into the facts, the things that you have to read, blah, 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 blah.
It's difficult.
I mean, it's really hard.
It's difficult to be informed.
And it is. And so, like, to have these things that you have to read and be like, oh, my God.
And now you have to wade through false information.
Yeah, and that's what I was fixing to say. And they're not the first thing that pops up. You got to go through all the... Like, you cannot even look for a news source for facts anymore. I mean, I know everybody knows that. But you have to go down and you have to find, like, medical journals to get your facts from. Like, seriously, like legit studies and things like that. And it's so hard. And people are like, oh, well, the facts are all out there. Yes, but I mean,
good luck finding
There's
them.
also a lot of things that aren't facts.
There's a lot of stuff piled on top of that to trick you.
And there's a lot of things that are just facts for now because it's the best we know. And so that's another thing that makes a conversation difficult is going into it being willing to understand that your position is probably not that accurate. It's somewhat it's definitely valuable and it's valid, but it doesn't mean it's accurate.
Right.
You're just doing the best you are with what you got, and it's okay, and it's actually encouraged to go into a conversation knowing you may not be right.
And to say, I don't know. Let me research that more. Or I don't know. Let's ask somebody who does.
Yeah, or share something with me that makes you believe what you believe. I want to try to understand it better. So,
or at least understand what you believe, whether I believe it or not.
Sure. Even if we're simply talking about perspectives, one of the primary things that we'll be teaching in this series is how to look at something from someone else's perspective. Because if you want to be influential, one of the best things you can possibly do is understand where somebody's coming from. Most people will be willing to compromise with you if you can at least understand where they're coming from. And so that's...
And show that you are.
Yes.
One of my tips that I had put in my comic is to relay what they're saying to you back to them to show that you are listening and retaining, and then have them do the same about what you're saying.
Exactly. It makes them feel validated, but it also helps you when you're doing that to
retain the information.
The information and make sure that you're listening to understand and not just sitting there like thinking about what you're going to say next and listening to reply.
Yes. So that's definitely a thing that can make a conversation difficult, is being willing to separate from your own desired outcome long enough to understand where the other person's coming from so that you can have a shared, understood conversation. So I think that pretty well covers all the things that make a conversation potentially difficult in most circumstances. Next week, what are we getting into? Are we going to be talking about techniques for this?
We're talking about gaslighting and manipulation next week.
Oh, yes, gaslighting and manipulation.
So
that's
the good
great.
stuff.
Yeah.
Now, the next week is being heard.
Is it?
Yeah, how to be heard.
Oh, okay. Well, when are we getting into gaslighting then?
Next week.
Okay, the thing after that is what you're saying.
We only have 3 weeks this month because we got
because
Thanksgiving.
of Thanksgiving, where you get to have all the difficult conversations over turkey.
Or you get to avoid them.
Or avoid them.
Yeah. Maybe we should do something on that too, like how to avoid a conversation.
How to avoid one. Oh, I'm getting a phone call. I'll be right back.
Yes.
Oh, did you hear that? They called my name over there.
Excuse me for just a second and then don't come back. Yes.
Or just dissociate while they're talking to you.
Yes, and just nod your head.
That's what I do that. Like, yes, I'm being punished. I'm just dissociating. I'm sorry.
So next week we will get into that. Anything else we need to promote?
Nope.
Any questions that we needed to field?
No, everybody was just saying, hey.
Oh, well, hello everybody.
everybody.
Good to see all of you. And, if you ever have any questions or topics, things that you want to discuss, please put it in our Facebook chat.
Yeah.
We're more than welcome or happy to respond to those things. We'll even have difficult conversations on here if you want to. I don't have a problem with that at all.
We can do it. Peace.
Yeah,
Yep.
we were actually, me and Andrea were discussing that yesterday.
I mean, we did do a newsletter. Well, I was doing a blog to go in the newsletter, and it was over my feelings about difficult conversations. So, and then we were discussing it. I mean, it's been a topic. Usually we flow right with the topics our conversations flow right with the topics that we're doing for the month.
So if you are having difficulty in your life with specific, difficult conversations, maybe with a partner, maybe with somebody that you're close to, friend, parent,
relative.
Yep, anything like that. If you are needing help or mediation in that process, therapy can be really good for that. And so we're here to help. You can contact us at Affinity Counseling Services, either on Facebook, or you can contact us by phone, 870-324-5122.